Hello guys, welcome to Ravio.
Every 4 years, something strange happens in America. Tens of millions of people who never watch a single match suddenly tune into the World Cup, and most of them spend the entire game completely lost. They watch a match end 0-0 and call it boring. They watch a grown man collapse like he's been shot, then sprint away 2 minutes later. They stare at a clock counting up instead of down, and nobody on screen seems to know exactly when the game actually ends. If that sounds familiar, stick around. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why football confuses Americans so much, and a few of these reasons are going to genuinely surprise you. Here's the truth nobody tells you up front. It's not that Americans are bad at sports, it's that football breaks almost every rule American sports trained your brain to expect. Let's start with the name itself, because even that is a trap. In America, football means an oval ball, body armor, and a sport that stops every 6 seconds. Everywhere else on the planet, football means kicking a round ball with your feet. Shocking, right? That's literally why it's called football. Roughly 8 billion people on Earth call it football. About 330 million call it soccer. So technically, America is the confused one here, not the rest of the world. But here's a twist almost nobody knows. The word soccer wasn't invented by Americans at all. It was invented by the British. It comes from ASOC, short for Association Football. Posh university students in England used to slap onto everything, and soccer stuck around in British slang for decades before America borrowed it. The country that mocks Americans for saying soccer actually gave them the word. And here's a rule so basic that nobody ever bothers explaining it, because everywhere outside America, it's just assumed knowledge. You can't use your hands. At all. Outside the goalkeeper's own box, touching the ball with your hand or arm, even completely by accident, is a foul. That's it. That's the entire premise of the sport. Feet, head, chest, knees, anything except your hands. Compare that to basketball, where using your hands is the whole point, or American football, where the goal is literally to catch and carry the thing. Football flips that completely. The one tool every other major sport encourages is the one tool this sport bans outright. That single rule is exactly why football looks so fluid, so chaotic, and so different from almost everything Americans grew up watching. Now let's talk about the score, because this one breaks American brains instantly. In the NFL, a final score might read 27-24. In basketball, teams routinely score over 100 points. In football, a normal final score looks like 1-0, 2-1, 0-0. To a brain trained on touchdowns and three-pointers, a 1-0 game looks like nothing happened. But here's what nobody explains. Scoring a goal in football is one of the hardest things to do in sports. The average professional match produces somewhere around 2 to 3 goals combined for both teams. That's why stadiums explode like a bomb went off the moment a goal goes in. It's rare. It's earned. Imagine if every single point in basketball required the difficulty of a half-court buzzer beater. That's roughly what one football goal feels like. And get this. In football, games are allowed to just end in a tie. In the NFL, a tie is rare, almost treated like a glitch. In the NBA, it's flat-out impossible. There's always overtime. But in regular season football, around the world, a draw is a completely normal Tuesday. Both teams just walk away with 1 point instead of 3, and that's it. No sudden death, no shootout, nothing. It's only in knockout tournaments, the winner-go-home rounds you see in something like the World Cup, where ties actually get resolved. First, the teams play 30 extra minutes called extra time. Still tied after that? It comes down to a penalty shootout. Players take turns shooting one-on-one against the goalkeeper from 12 yards out, and whoever scores more wins. One single kick can end a month-long tournament, watched by a literal billion people. No pressure. Next up, the clock. And this one really breaks people. American sports count down. Football counts up. 0 climbs all the way to 90 minutes. But here's the part that throws people off completely. The referee, one guy standing on the field, keeps the real time, not the giant scoreboard you're staring at. At the end of each half, he adds extra minutes for things like injuries or substitutions. It's called stoppage time. Nobody knows the exact number until he holds up a little board on the sideline. So a 90-minute match might actually run 96 or 97 minutes, and there's no official way to know in advance. Compare that to American football, where the clock stops constantly for commercials and replay reviews. Football just keeps running. 45 straight minutes, no media timeouts, no ad breaks. That's actually a financial headache for broadcasters because the entire American sports advertising model depends on a clock that stops on command. Football refuses to cooperate. Now here's the rule that confuses literally everyone watching for the first time. Offside. Picture the last defender as a security line in front of the goal. An attacker isn't allowed to stand behind that line waiting for a pass like he's loitering outside a candy store before it opens. If an attacker is closer to the goal than both the ball and the last defender at the moment a teammate passes to him, the play stops. No goal counts. Sounds simple. It is not simple in real time. Referees used to judge gaps measured in inches at full sprint speed with their eyes alone. That's exactly why football introduced VAR, video assistant referee technology, that draws lines across the broadcast to measure offside down to a few centimeters. Centimeters. A goal can be wiped off the board because a player's shoulder was ahead by the width of a phone case. Then there's the part Americans find the most ridiculous of all. Grown men collapsing like they've been hit by a truck. It's called diving or simulation. Players exaggerate contact to win a foul or a penalty. Why does this happen? Because punishment in football is brutal. A yellow card is a warning that can completely change how a player plays for the rest of the match. A red card means he's gone, ejected, and his team finishes the game with one fewer player on the field. So players bait contact on purpose. It's controversial. It's also strangely a skill of its own. Some of the best floppers on the planet earn part of their massive salary specifically because they're convincing. Here's something that might genuinely shock you, though. In most football leagues worldwide, finishing in last place doesn't just sting, it's catastrophic. It's called relegation. Finish at the bottom of the table at season's end, and your team doesn't get a top draft pick like in the NFL. You get demoted entirely, drop down into a lower division. Imagine if the worst team in the NFL didn't get the number 1 pick. Imagine they got shipped down to play a college league next season instead. That's relegation. It's why football matches in April, ones that look meaningless on paper with nothing to win, can feel more intense than an actual playoff game. Those teams aren't playing for a trophy, they're playing to survive. One more thing trips up new viewers. Football barely has fixed positions, not the way American sports do. In American football, a quarterback throws, a lineman blocks, and that's basically the job for the entire game. In football, a fullback can become a winger mid-match. A midfielder can defend for 10 seconds, then sprint 60 yards to score a goal, all within the same minute. Formations get written as numbers, like 4-4-2, but players ignore those numbers constantly the second the whistle blows. That fluid chaos is a big reason football commentary sounds like a foreign language to new viewers. There's no neat playbook to memorize. There's just spacing, instinct, and constant restless movement. Here's another quiet rule that throws Americans off completely. Substitutions are limited. In basketball, you can swap players in and out all game long, no real penalty. In football, most competitions only allow 5 substitutions per match, and once a player comes off, that's it. He cannot go back in, no matter how the game changes. So coaches have to gamble, pull a tired star too early and you might need him in the final 10 minutes. Wait too long and he might get injured or simply run out of gas completely. One sideline decision made under pressure can flip the entire match. And here's the part that makes all this confusion even stranger. Despite every single one of these differences, football is, by a massive margin, the most watched sport on the entire planet. A single World Cup final regularly pulls in more total viewers worldwide than the Super Bowl gets across several years combined. Roughly half the world's population tunes into some part of the tournament, not just the final, the whole event stretched across a month. Part of that comes down to something almost embarrassingly simple. All you really need to play football is a ball, And kids across Brazil, Nigeria, and rural Vietnam have made do with even less than that. Rolled up socks, empty cans, a bundle of plastic bags. No pads, no helmet, no expensive gear required. That near-zero barrier to entry is a huge reason this became the default sport of the entire planet. Meanwhile, in America, football usually sits behind the NFL, college football, and basketball in weekly attention. So football isn't a confusing sport, it isn't a lesser sport either. Americans just grew up speaking a completely different sports language, different scoring logic, different clock logic, different punishment for failure. And once that new language clicks, the confusion disappears fast. Most people who genuinely give it a real shot end up hooked within a handful of matches. So let's run through it quickly. Football confuses Americans because of low scores that are actually rare and precious, a clock that counts up instead of down, a referee controlling time instead of a scoreboard, an offside rule measured in centimeters, fouls dramatic enough to look like a crime scene, and a relegation system that punishes failure far harder than any draft pick ever could. Here's the one thing worth remembering above everything else. Football isn't complicated, it's just different. Nobody overseas built this sport to confuse Americans on purpose. America simply built its own separate sports universe with its own internal logic over more than a century, completely isolated from the rest of the planet. Now that you know the rules behind the rules, your next match is going to feel completely different. You'll understand exactly why a 0-0 draw can be one of the tensest 90 minutes in all of sports. If this made the game click even a little bit, subscribe. There's a lot more football breakdowns coming, and this is genuinely just the surface of how deep this sport actually goes.